And today we are talking about a complete guide to coming up with your product roadmap. And product roadmap is a very important process as part of the planning phase, and it's a tool that a product manager uses throughout the whole life cycle of the product. Product roadmap is actually a derivative from your product strategy. It's a view of your product strategy. So your product strategy should be done beforehand, before you come up with the roadmap, because otherwise your roadmap are just assumptions. So roadmap is actually a style of communicating your product strategy. So that's the mindset you want to approach when you're creating your product roadmap. And all the presentations that you put together are just one view of your product strategy. Same thing with all these one pages that you put together for GMs and head off. They are a view of your product strategy. So you must do the product strategy first. Basically, you can't create a good roadmap unless your strategy is done. And you use it to influence, you use it to align trade-offs between your team, value versus effort, and you use it to prepare for launches. Usually a roadmap is done a couple of weeks or even months before a product is launched. So your team can get together, your team as in your wider teams can get together and start preparing for the launch of your product. And what I mean is not just the development team who's building the product, but also your marketing teams that might have to update the website or update the marketing campaigns, your sales teams that might have to update the collaterals, your customer service teams that might have to do FAQs. And if they have like offshore call centers, they might have to do training. So that's basically what your product roadmap is for helping people to put together a launch preparation plan. Now, a roadmap is very different to a project plan, and we'll dive a lot deeper into that. It's a huge difference. Roadmap is usually around the stuff that you're doing for your product, which includes things around what you're doing right now, functions and features, and also what are you going to work on in the future as well. So when are other features and other products are going to come in the future? It's very different to a project plan, because project plan has other cross-functional items like updating FAQs and training our sales teams and so on. Product roadmap is just purely around the product that you're building. Now, it's always a balance, as all things in life. Same thing with the product strategy, same thing with the roadmap. It's a balancing of different needs from your senior leadership teams, marketing teams, sales teams, customer service teams, vendors, customers, and so on. It's never like you never want to build a roadmap purely for one persona. You want to balance the needs across multiple teams, so you're communicating with transparency. And in previous classes, we'll talk about managing product ideas and managing different stakeholders' expectation of product ideas and product features. This is actually one of the tools that you use to manage expectations and manage ideas from different stakeholders. And a roadmap is different to a backlog. A backlog talks about the how you're getting stuff done, and a roadmap talks about the why. So again, it's the communication tool for your product strategy. So if someone is reading your roadmap and they don't understand why you're doing this and why you're building what you're building and where you're going, then you basically lost the point of a roadmap, is to communicate why. And the product backlog is there for you to talk about what are we doing. So integrating Google Analytics, tagging this data, all that stuff. It's about the how of how we achieve those products. So that's the main difference between a backlog and a roadmap. And what's the difference between, and we'll talk a lot about how do you turn a product roadmap, a product backlog into a product roadmap later on. And the roadmap is used across all parts of the life cycle, so across the whole thing. Why? It's because your product strategy is used across the whole parts of the life cycle, right? So a roadmap is a view of the strategy. So same thing. Your roadmap should be used across the whole way through. Same thing as a strategy. And usually when we think about roadmaps, we think of like one roadmap. But spoiler alert, there's actually 3 roadmaps that you need to be across as a PM. You don't have to create every single one of these, but you must be across every single one of these. There's always some sort of high-level initiative roadmap from your business. And this sometimes is called a goals roadmap, objectives roadmap, themes roadmap, strategic roadmap, depending on what book you read and what company you work in. But basically, these are initiatives or high-level goals that your company wants to hit, and usually sits at the like a quarterly level, at a longer-term level. And there's also a thing we call the product roadmap, which is the solutions on how you achieve these goals. And in previous classes, we talk about the cascading of objectives, right? So roadmap is something that you use to align back to the business goal. Same thing with the marketing team. The marketing team might have a marketing roadmap that aligns to the goals. Sales team, sales roadmap that aligns back to the goal. So your product is just one function of that. And then from there, you have your feature roadmap, which is the details that you're building for the products, right? So you have a feature roadmap, and they're all used for different audiences at the different times. So as a PM, you need to be across all three types of roadmap. Don't have to create every single one of these, and I'll talk about who owns this in a second. But yeah, there's three roadmaps, at least three. And very different to a project plan. Project plan has things that consist of marketing team is doing something, and a customer service team is doing their work, and then operations is doing that work. And usually a product roadmap actually just fits into one area of a project plan. And usually that's called like development or like product development. Like it doesn't go into the details of the exact features that you're building for your product, because that's what a product roadmap does, or a feature roadmap, depending on the different levels of communication. So usually it's summed up in a project plan, and we call that like product development, and that's just like one line item within a project plan. Cool. Now, does that make sense? Is there any questions on this? All good so far? Cool. Great. Awesome.
David,
Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
If you just could go back to a couple of slides where you're talking about the three different backlogs. You're talking about the initiative one, right? If you could just elaborate on what you mean by, because with possibly an example that would help me understand what an initiative roadmap we are referring to there.
Perfect. Great question. Here's an example. That was actually my next slide. Good stuff. So here's an example. So an initiative.
Sorry, I jumped the gun.
No, all good, mate. Like, great. Like, this is meant to help you think. Yeah. So awesome. Great question. So yeah, initiative are like high-level business goals that your business wants to hit. So your business goals are like, enable digital banking for a bank, right? These are goals that you want to do, or like take over the Japan market in Q3, or like launch a mobile proposition so we can get to the Singapore market. And so on. These are high-level goals and bets from your business. And yeah, that's basically what the business should do. I know not every business is aligned like that, and that's why you should know these roadmaps, because if they're not, then you should ask the questions like, what are the big high-level goals and initiatives that we should hit? Because I can't create my product roadmap without these. So yeah, these are high-level goals. And yeah, big businesses do that really well because there's a whole machine of people that does the planning. If you're on a smaller startup, this sometimes might not exist. At a yearly level, that's okay, because startups don't really know what they're going to do in 12 months' time. But at least they should know from a quarterly level. So for this quarter or next quarter, you should have a pretty clear view of what are the goals that you want to hit. And this is called initiative roadmap, goals roadmap. And if you use like OKRs, they call it objectives that you want to reach for the quarter. If you use like another method, like waterfall method, you call it strategic roadmaps. They're all just different ways to formulate goals, and yeah, different semantics for different ways of naming goals. So that's a goals roadmap. From there, you have the features in the product that you're building. So the product could be a web banking product, like making a banking portal. There could be another product team that looks after the mobile product. Could be another product team that looks after the platform as well. Like could be a platform of different services like logging in or keeping transactions and so on. So that's what the product roadmap does. They create different roadmaps, different products that you're creating for your company, and that goal gets cascaded down into here. So it's exactly the same thing. And then at the end, you have your feature roadmap, which is basically all the features that you're building for the product. And each feature could have its own release date, and each feature fits into like the overall product roadmap. Cool. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Sorry, I had put myself on mute.
No, all good. Nah, all good question. I love them. Yeah, so that's how everything sort of lines up together. And let me throw some of spanner in the works. Project plan. So project plan is separate from this. A project plan could exist across all levels, right? Because project plans, it could be a project to help the business figure out the goal, and that could be a project plan for that. It could be a project plan to help your product teams figure out launch products at a high level. For example, if you're working big companies that are cross-national, like Facebook, for example, you might have a project plan that help big products launch. But at the same time, you might have a project plan that help features launch. So project plan is different to a product plan, a product roadmap. So yeah, that makes sense. So project plan is another way that project managers use. And usually a product manager will work with like a delivery manager or project manager if the work of delivering these products and features is too big. Sometimes a product manager can just look after delivery if it's a small feature. Most of the time that happens, but sometimes you might have to work with the like delivery manager if it's like cross-national products that you got to launch, and that's where the project plan comes into play. Cool. And how do you create a good roadmap then? Well, let's dive a little bit deeper into how you make one now. So, as mentioned previously, you have many types of roadmaps that you create. Usually, the initiative and goals roadmap is created by the head of product, VP of product, or CPO, or your whoever that is senior enough to work with the business to figure out the goals for the year. And if you work in a startup and this is you and the CEO, then that's you. If you're at a big company and you got multiple layers, then that's probably your boss or your boss's boss to align the goals. From there, usually the product manager that would own the product roadmap. So is you're the product. If you're working as a product manager, then that's you. Same thing. Product manager will also own the feature roadmap as well. So there's usually two types of roadmap that you juggle when you're working in a small, like a scale up, for example, where I used to be at Society One. I would juggle both the product roadmap at a high level, like what are the products that we want to launch, different platforms, customer portals, and so on. And then I would dive deep to manage when are those features launching for those roadmaps. So I have two roadmaps that I create and manage simultaneously, and then both sort of like work with each other. Big companies, however, sometimes you might have roles like product owners or junior PMs. Depends on how your company is structured. Sometimes you might want to give them some features to work on, and they might actually work on the feature roadmap. So it depends on how your company is structured. And there's a big weird thing right now with like product owners and product managers and BAs. I won't go into the politics of that, but just look at these as three levels of delivery. As a result, you need to have three different types of roadmap to manage this delivery, and they're usually owned by these three levels of titles and different roles. And how you name your roles in your company is going to be different, but but these are the three functions. Cool. Anyone got any questions on this? Oh, good. Cool. All right. So how do you come up with a really good roadmap? Well, first step is you got to align the goals, right? That's the first step one. If your goals are not aligned, and I know not every business has aligned goals, and this is a common thing that you see in product teams. That's one of the main reasons why product managers are hired in the first place, is because the company is overwhelmed with ideas. They're like, oh, we need someone to look after this for us. We don't know how to do it. So that's why when you, as a PM, as a fresh PM, you might walk in and you realize, oh, the product roadmap's a mess because the goals are not aligned. So when you want to align the goals, what you want to do is basically work out with the business. What are we doing per quarter? All right. And step one, as you can see here, usually this is how a perfect company should structure. This is in theory, but you should work towards sort of like aligning different ways, right? So you've got your product vision that gets into the mission that they're working on. From the company goals gets cascaded into the product team goals. Product team goals will have product goals. So that's in theory how everything should structure. And if some of the links are missing, that's where the confusion comes in. So first step is you want to get all the objectives that your company is working towards in one place. So you want to set up meetings with your VPs, your CEOs, your GMs to figure out, well, what are all the goals they have for the business? Where their heads at? And are these goals aligned? and get them all into one place, like a Trello board, for example. That's what I usually use. Go to Trello, create a Trello board of different goals for different businesses. And then in your one-on-one meetings, ask them what are high-level goals, and it basically becomes like an idea backlog or a bunch of random things that they want to achieve. And this backlog could consist of many things. And in the last lessons, we talked about ideas can come from the level of an initiative. Ideas can come from a product level, feature level, bugs, tasks, and etc. So you got to know what type of idea they're giving you, and capture this. And you want to set up a prioritization for the team, right, in the next couple of weeks to prioritize what you're working on. And in the conversation, use OKR as a framework. We talked about that in the last in previous lessons when we in the lesson called coming up with objectives for your product. So go back to that class if you want to review how to use OKRs, and you want to tease out these goals. And then also your stakeholders might give you ideas instead of goals. That's okay. That happens all the time. So take a step back and understand what type of metric that it will move, and whether this idea is an initiative, a product, a feature, or bug, an issue, or just a task you're going to do. And then put everything into a Confluence page or Trello board, or even like Google Sheets. So you can just make this as transparent as possible. And then once you've spoken to every single stakeholder across the company, including the CEO, then you should have a pretty good view of like where the goal of the business is and where they're going at. And if you're hired as a PM, most of the time is that there's probably 20 goals that they want to hit. And then you're going to prioritize this, right? You're going to prioritize the goals for your business based on value versus effort. At a high level, you can use like other fancy frameworks like RICE and every other frameworks too. We talked about this in the prioritization session. So go back to the feature prioritization class. You want to watch the different methods that you can use to prioritize. But let's just use value versus effort because it's the most simplest. So you want to set up a time with the leadership team and prioritize the goal for the next few months. Outline outline the different goals for the business. Put them on the wall so everyone can see exactly where the goals are. You also want to share the initiatives, the Google Sheets or the Trello board that you put together beforehand with the business. Make sure everyone's across them before you have the prioritization session. Because otherwise, it'll be a big waste of time. Everyone's going to go in and look at, oh yeah, we should do that. Let them read your Trello board, answer questions, have one-on-one meetings, make sure everyone is across exactly what everyone's goals are before you do the prioritization session. Because if you jump in too early, then it will be a reading session. It wouldn't be a prioritization session. And then you can use different methods like Muscals and value versus effort for you to do that. So if you want to learn more about these efforts, jump back into feature prioritization. We talked about different methods that you can use in that class. And not every business is going to forward plan 12 months because the world's uncertain. But aim for at least 1 quarter. That's a minimal viable planning MVP. At least 1 quarter, because if you know this quarter, then you can prioritize your product features, right, for your product. So aim for at least 1 quarter minimal viable planning, and also ideally you want to have 2 quarters in front, not too far in the future, like 3 quarters, 4 quarters is too much. Ideally 1 or 2 quarters, that would be a perfect number. And you want to do this on a regular basis, so you're continuously sort of rolling planning. So so every quarter you want to do this. And so that's basically it. So you should have a roadmap that looks like this, right? That looks like Q1, we're focused on improving customer experience. This is how we measure the success of this initiative, improve NPS scores by 20 points. Q2, I could have something like owning the mobile channel, which means increased app downloads and also average rating in the store. That's basically what you should aim for. This is ideal. This is mostly in corporate. Corporate love to do Q3, Q4 planning and plan for the whole year. Because why? They have stakeholders, they've got shareholders, they're communicating like 1,000 people. You got investment banks investing into them. They want to know exactly what you're doing. And they move a lot slower too. So corporates love to do this. Smaller company, current quarter, scale ups, 2 quarters. That's just a benchmark, by the way. You can, every company is different, but start with that benchmark and then tailor it to what fits your company. Any questions on this?
Yeah, Dave.
Yes.
So I noticed that you're adding metrics for all of these goals.
Yes.
Do you ever come across the fact that people say, well, we want to grow revenue, and then you might ask the question, okay, well, how much do you want to grow it by? And then they just say that's a stupid question, like, as much as possible. Why should we cap it at, say, 20%? How often do people understand these metrics, and what do you do if they don't have an answer for what that number is?
Yeah, that's a good question. Usually what I do is I go back and ask them, that's great, we want to grow as much as possible, but what should we focus on for Q1? What would be a really good benchmark for us to aim so we know that we're on the right track? So I'll ask them that question. And then they'll be like, well, I don't know, like, you tell me. Then what you want to do is you want to understand, well, what's our forecast for the year for the company? Like, how much how much money do we expect to make this year? Or how much money have our investors invested into it? And just do a high level forecast and just divide it by 12 months and then just times it by 3 months, and start with that. And that would start the conversation, and the business would quickly realize, like, oh, we don't really have any clear goals. And you want to use this as a way to kick off that conversation around, like, forward planning for at least that quarter.
Okay.
Yeah. And this happens actually quite all the time. It's not just revenue, but also retention rate as well. Like, how many customers you want to retain. You're like, well, 100%.
All of them? Yeah, exactly.
All of them, right? But that's not realistic. And just say, well, based on our past metric, we only retain 50% of the customer. But let's just, forward plan for 50%. Yeah. And a lot of the time you got to take the people through the journey. And that's why knowing this roadmap is really handy for us to have the conversation. Good question. So now that you've got this up and going, the initiative roadmap. Let's figure out the product roadmap. Let's figure out how we want to achieve those goals. And very similar to coming up with your product features. In previous classes, we talked about managing different ideas and how you align product ideas to your company goals. And I use this exact slide to do that. And so right now, what you want to do is you want to figure out, well, what are some product ideas that would achieve this goal? So that's why product coming up with the product roadmap is actually after you've done your product strategy, because by this time you should know exactly, you have an idea, you validated it, you've done your product strategy. You should have a pretty clear view of what type of product that we're building to achieve this goal, because otherwise you wouldn't be here. You're too early. If you're creating a product roadmap and these are just ideas, then you're way too early in the roadmap process to even create one. Take a step back, go back to idea, validate, and plan. Figure out, how do we prioritize multiple ideas to achieve this goal? How do we validate the multiple ideas to achieve this goal? And then get into the high level planning and then detailed planning. And now you're here. So so don't jump in and create a roadmap straight away. But that's basically what you want to do in the next step, is align all your products that you're creating to the goal. And you might have multiple products, not just one. And multiple products can also reach multiple goals too. So this is just an example of one product, one goal, multiple product, but you can have, multiple product with multiple goals. And that's basically it for coming up with the product roadmap. All the stuff that you're building, all the features and functions that you're building. And what's the difference between a product feature and a product? What's the difference between product and a feature? It's just different perspectives. And I'll talk about that in a second. And what you want to include in your roadmap are these things. So you must link everything that you have to an initiative or goal or themes or whatever you want to call it. You must have some sort of progress and update, percentage of completion, number of tasks done, some sort of progress, some sort of update, some sort of broad timeline of when you expect these features, these products to be launched. Now, I know timelines is a sensitive topic, right? Like, we know it's very hard to predict the future because we don't know, because software is software is unpredictable. But you should have some sort of broad timelines, as in, would you even launch this product in this quarter or in this month or next month? So have some really broad timelines. Don't get into the specifics, but just month, beginning of the month, end of the month, mid-month, first week, second week. So that's why you hear a lot of PMs say those type of words, because it's unpredictable. Impact, this is optional, so it depends on your company. Sometimes you want to have an impact, and this could be like a high revenue impact, mid and low. So it depends on you. You can actually add some sort of impact. And then owners as well. You want to add the person that owns this goal for your business. And there's usually some sort of like senior stakeholders that owns that line if your business is planned well. And if you don't, that's okay. Ask that question, like, who is the person that owns this initiative? And if all in doubt, then pick one person. It's either the CEO or your department head. So your head of product, for example. Or actually, sometimes might not be. It could be a sales team, it could be a marketing team, but make sure you have one owner for that initiative. And keep it high level, because a roadmap is a display of your product strategy, right? So your product strategy should have the details of this. Your roadmap is a high level display of that. So keep it high level, don't overload with details. Anything in details, shoot them off to the product strategy. They can read more about that. And then after that's done, you're going to work out your feature roadmap, which comes from there. And your feature roadmap could be very, very detailed, right? Because you have multiple features across multiple releases, right? Because sometimes you might have a product that you want to build, like a banking product or mobile product, and then you might have multiple logging features and payment features and so on. And that will be spread across multiple teams. You have dependency across multiple releases from different teams. So it's going to look like this. This is how it realistically look like. You have different releases for a product, and usually releases are grouped by the way that by how your company structure, how your company release products. So this is done by a sort of like a 2-week sprint period. If a bank, like most of the time, a bank will have like a 2-week release sprint. So you want to put your features as part of these release period. But sometimes companies might group their releases by packages. So for example, we release this massive product launch that is happening in 3 months, and you want to package your feature as part of that big release, and that could be structured very differently as well. And again, releases are just very tailored to your company. So just piggyback on the release train and communicate what features are being released when. And you might have to keep track of multiple releases for different features as well. And this is an example of what we do at Society One. We basically, so we have our new application form that has 2-week releases. From there, we have multiple features in here, just improving validation and also things like merging pipelines with verifications and so on. These are the stuff that's been sort of shipped already, and you got all the other stuff that's also happening in the future as well. And what you want to do is at the end of every release, you want to re-estimate again. So just relook at all the releases and just rework on the timelines, because the more you know, the more accurate the planning is going to be. So don't just do a release and then leave it as that and just hope that everything will run. After every single release, you should really go back and re-update the roadmap and re-communicate back to the business on when things change. And the more frequent you do that, the better you manage expectations and the more influential you be. Cool. Any questions on this? All good? Cool, nice. Usually a release is a tricky one. And also A/B testing and all that stuff, that would also be part of this roadmap too. So if you want to do like A/B testing in here, so if this is an A/B test, you want to create another item in the future to end the A/B test as well. So keep that in mind as part of releasing features. Cool. All right. And when does something become a map to a roadmap? Well, it just means when something is a map, it's got no date. When something's got a roadmap, it means there's a date. That's basically the difference. You might hear all these fancy terms that's gonna call it. Feature backlog, sometimes I'll hold that. What's a backlog? Backlog are items that got no dates. Backlog feature roadmap of the thing that got dates. That's basically the way I define it. And depending on what book you read, sometimes they call it differently as well. But the way that I define it is anything that's got a map, it's got no date, or anything that's got a backlog, it's got no date. As soon as there's a date, then becomes a roadmap, because that becomes like a road that you got to take. So that's basically the difference between these two terms. And also estimating the effort as well for each item. And you can see this, right? How do you know that this feature is going to hit this release? Well, you want to go back into your delivery methods. So roadmap, again, is a tool to communicate your strategy. It doesn't skip the work that you got to do. So if you want to predict when these features are coming and when, and turning your features from a feature map to a feature roadmap, then you got to estimate, right, with your team. So use methods like, using the feature map that you created, and just estimate with the team, and use a previous benchmark that's been done already, and ask them use different methods, or like t-shirt sizing, numbers, and you want to assign different dates, different effort, different value. And in previous classes, we talked about the 3 steps for you to prioritize and estimate work. You want to estimate by the value first, using some sort of value estimation like Mascal or must have, should have, won't have, could have. And then you want to estimate the effort, which is this step right there, t-shirt sizing and numbers. And then from there, you want to decide on where does that sit on the roadmap. So those 3 steps: value first, effort, and then decide. And then once that's done, then you want to assign different timeframes to the items in your roadmap. And again, when you're prioritizing this, the conversation is just as important as the outcome itself. Why? It's because you're still in hopes and dreams land. Honestly, I don't even know how long that's going to take, or your team or your tech lead, no matter how senior they are, unless they've done this for more than 3 times successfully with no problems, then the estimation is going to be off. Like changing a button color, yeah, they've done it 3 times. That's an accurate estimate. But creating a feature that allows you to search by book titles, probably never done it before, so less accurate. So the conversation is just as important to discuss the context and agree and move forward with the featured priority. So this is just the outcome is great, but the conversation is just as important. And you want to do this after every single release as well. So every time you launch something, you know more about how you want to do those features, come back, update the estimate for the feature roadmap. And that's basically how everything ties up together. So you have your high-level roadmap, like initiative roadmap, goals roadmap, objective roadmap, strategic roadmap, whatever you call it, which is like this, enable digital banking. And then from there, you have your product roadmap, which is like your web banking, mobile banking, or your platform roadmap. This is just an example. You can also have products like identity product and payment products and all that stuff. So depending on how your team is structured. And also you have your features, which gets into those release dates. And everything fits into this project plan, which consists of everything else that your project team is working on. So yeah, so that's basically it, how everything ties up together. Any questions? I know there's a few questions in the chat, so I might actually answer them as well. What tool do you use for feature roadmap? Just Prioritisation, yeah, good stuff. What tools? So for feature roadmap, I would use multiple tools. So this tool that I use in the example here, this is a tool called AHA. I actually quite like AHA because it's got the different levels of roadmaps all into one tool. However, it is complex, and it is for like scale teams that's got like 2 or 3 product people. So if you want to do something simple, I would just create 3 versions in Trello. A goals roadmap, 1 board. Product roadmap, 1 board. Feature roadmap, 1 board. And I wouldn't go too far as of linking stuff together. You can probably put the links in the comments and you can link stuff, but just create 3 different roadmaps in Trello. That will get you into good practice of understanding the 3 different levels of planning that needs to be done. And then you can also use tools like Product Board. Product Board does that really well, and they've connected everything together. It's a fairly easy to use tool. There's another tool called, Product Board is really good for that. There's another tool called Product Plan, which only just talks about high-level roadmaps, doesn't go into the detail. And I'll talk more about tools in a second, but these are the three tools: AHA, Trello, and Product Board. These are three really good ones. And there's probably other ones as well. Tools always come and go. Cool. And the common thing that you're going to confuse yourself here is feature versus product. What's the difference between feature and product? And if you go to Quora and you want to type in what's the feature versus product, there's like a whole debate around that. But honestly, feature product, it's just different perspectives. That's basically it. Has anyone heard of the story where Steve Jobs approached Dropbox and he wanted to acquire Dropbox? And the Dropbox guys are like, nah, I don't want you to acquire us. We're a big company. We're a massive product. And then Steve is like, nah, you're just a feature of Apple. You're not a product. So that's exactly the same mentality. It's all different. It's all depends on the perspective and who you're communicating to across multiple levels. For example, Instagram stories, right? So if you have a Instagram stories is probably a product of Instagram, and they will call that a product. But to Facebook, right, because Facebook owns Instagram, Facebook, to them, Instagram is a product and Instagram story is a feature. So if you're communicating to Mark Zuckerberg and you're a product manager for Instagram, then you say, great, like we're creating this feature called Instagram stories. And Mark's going to be like, great, awesome, I get what you mean. But if you're communicating to internal teams within Instagram, then yeah, Instagram stories is a product within Instagram. And you want to communicate to other product managers. And other product managers don't like to get called feature managers. They're like different political discussion there. But yeah, so internal. So it all depends. But at a high level, it's just basically different ways of grouping things together. Product lines, product features. They're just different ways. And depending on who you're talking to, then you want to communicate differently as well. Another example that I came across recently, they talked about, well, how do you tell the difference between a product and a feature? Well, if you look at the MacBook Pro, right, the MacBook Pro will have this Intel i7 chips. So Intel i7 chips is a feature of the MacBook Pro, but Intel itself is a company, it's a massive company, and Intel i7 is actually a product of Intel. So again, look at it that way. So whenever people ask you product feature, just use the MacBook Pro analogy. It all depends on the perspective that you're communicating to. And as a PM, you need to know who you're communicating to with your roadmap and your product strategy, so you can actually use the right terminology, so people know what you're talking about. Cool. Any questions?
I have a question. If you could go back to the slide,
Yep.
Where you're talking about the three teams there.
Yep, three teams. This?
Feature. Yes, you could use this one. Right. Now, here, if in the feature roadmap, when you're looking at these teams, if there is an horizontal in terms of an architecture or a platform team, now, how does the platform team sit here? Because this platform is going to be shared across the entire product, right? Now, how does this sit, and how does alignment with the initiatives, and how do they all align, if I phrase that well enough?
Good. I love that. Great question. Great question. So product. So there are usually when you structure a product team, and this is looking beyond product management now. It's more about take a step back. This is more from a leadership and company structure perspective. So it is looking from the perspective of a head of product.
Break. This is why I don't like it.
Oh, okay. Sure. So yeah. So usually
I've set from 9 to 12:40, and my eyes are hurting. You do hours.
Sorry. All right. So I might just mute a few of us as well. That's okay. So yeah, let's take a step back. This is looking at from a company's a product team structure perspective now. So product managers don't really need to get into that much detail, but at a high level, usually product teams are structured by two ways. One is you want to structure a product team using by customer-facing external products like web products and mobile products and so on. That's one way to structure a product team. Now, But sometimes big tech companies, they might have an internal platform that they want to use. So as a result, then you want to structure a product team using internal product teams as well. That's where the platform team comes into play. And when does something become a customer facing to a platform? A platform product team should look after common services that is being used by the team. And if your customer facing team cannot live or cannot build their products without these common services, that's when you want to structure an internal product team like a platform team, for example. So it just depends on how your company is structured, and there's no perfect way to structure a company. But that's where the different roadmaps comes into play. So as a product manager, you don't need to know like why do they like how you want to structure this. You just need to know the theory behind it, which is every company has different ways of structuring of different teams. Internal product teams like platform teams, they are there to service common services, create product for common services, so they can enable your customer-facing product teams. Does that answer your question, or is that getting too much theory?
No, absolutely. Because I was relating it to my personal experience with a B2B company which I used to work with. We had a platform team, which actually we had other issues in terms of the alignment where we are having. That's the reason I was relating to what you said. But you did answer my question. Thanks for that.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, so we had the same situation as Society One too. So we have an internal so I was looking after the customer facing side, customer products, and we had an internal product team as well. And our internal product team looks after the features within the Salesforce platform. So, and then she would actually run her team, and then we work really closely to get those services out.
Right, perfect. If you don't mind me, can I pose another question?
Yeah,
that's all right. Yeah, sure. Thanks. So now with this roadmap, there's also, because when we release something into the market, and there is going to be a feedback loop in terms of the iteration, how do we fit this into the roadmap in itself? Do we indicate that on the roadmap?
Can you repeat that question again? Sorry.
Now, once the product is shipped to the customer and the customers start using it, there's going to be a feedback loop which happens. Now, there are going to be bug fixes are going to come, and there are going to be some products or some features which are being underutilized. So we're going to do a market validation out there in terms of what the outcomes are and rebuild. How does that fit into the roadmap?
Yeah, good point. So the roadmap, again, is the display of your product strategy. So don't think about the roadmap just yet. When new ideas comes up, you're actually into this phase, right? Which is growth or maturity, and you're going to have ideas that's going to come through. And what you want to do is go back to the basics. And when an idea comes through, validate it. So idea, validate, plan. So go back to like you want to create like an idea backlog of different ideas, and pick up the ideas that fits within your company strategy. Go back, validate it, and then you plan for it. So that's how you manage it. You create a separate ideas backlog for ideas. And when ideas come through, when your initiative roadmap and all the goals are set for the quarter, then you can pick up an idea from your idea backlog and see if that aligns with the business. And if it does, great, go and validate it. And then once that's been done, then you come back and you want to update your roadmap accordingly. So when ideas come through, it doesn't hit the roadmap immediately. It shouldn't even belong on the roadmap at all. Any ideas should go back to an idea backlog.
Perfect. That sounds right. Now, but if we're releasing a feature and the adoption on a particular feature is low for various reasons, it could be, let me bring up an example. Because of the performance. The performance is not as good as it was anticipated when it goes on to the customers. So how does that align back into the product roadmap? That's not a new idea. It's more of a shortcoming on what was released in the market.
Yep. Yeah. And technically, that's also an idea or feature, right? So what you want to do is you want to understand which part of the roadmap this new idea come from, this idea will fit into, and then prioritize against other items in that idea, in what you have planned already. So let's go deep into this then. Let's assume that you launch a product and you got some feedback and there's like a bunch of stuff you sort of committed already. And when a new idea comes along, like an improvement or so, just prioritize it against the stuff that's been, been committed, and say, hey, has that more value or less value for what you're building?
Sure. Thanks.
Yep. And I know this is high level. We actually got a recording on this called Managing Product Ideas, and we used a deeper example of that as well. And so, yeah, if you join the Slack group, there's a recording on that. Or if not, I'll just send out the link afterwards. You can watch that course. There's a whole course on like managing the ideas.
Awesome. Perfect. Sorry, I missed that, but I'll definitely refer to that.
Yeah, all good. Yeah. And this is the course that links everything up together as well. So there's always these questions that will pop up. Cool.
Dave?
Yes.
Just to step on the same idea, what about the bugs? How do they come back into the plan?
Yeah. So bugs is exactly the same. Look at the value of the bug and then just plan according to what you're doing. And I know sometimes there is like a agenda of bugs should be done 50% of the way, or like 50% of your sprint should fix up bugs, or like we should dedicate amount of time to do it. But at the end of the day, you need to look at bugs like this. It's something that you're sacrificing your company's time for to work on. So I will look at bugs as another feature or another value. And if there's a strategy within your company that says bugs must hit, bugs must be 50% of your sprint, and there's a commitment on quality, that's actually a goal for your business. You want to get commitment on that at a high level, put it into a roadmap, because that would allows you to prioritize your bugs. So I will look at bugs as just like another feature, another work that your team has to do. And there's always a trade-off between what are we doing, what are we not doing.
Right. Yeah. So what you're saying is there could be instances where you have to go all the way back to idea. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yep. There could be instances where you got to align with the company goal first to create like a bug-free product in here. And there's a goal within the business that says we want to create a bug-free product, or our goal within business that is to always, spend 20% of our engineering time on bugs. And that has to be committed at a high level first.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, all good. And when, bugs is a tricky one. And did I talk about that? Actually, I haven't talked about that. I might share with us a post that I wrote about bugs and how you manage bugs, because what you want to do, there's a 5-step process to bugs. You got to capture it, you got to understand the value and the impact. You got to prioritize it with the team, and then you're going to decide 2 ways of managing it: disrupt the current sprint, or dedicate it X amount of time in next sprint to manage it. So I'll share a blog post in the email actually at the meetup, and have a read on that. It's a 5-step process to do that. Cool. All right. So we're nearly there. We've got 5 minutes to go. And I want to show us, before we go, I want to show us different ways for you to structure a roadmap. Because why? Well, roadmap is a view of your product strategy. So as a result, the view could change, right? Depending on your audience, just like how you want to customize an experience of an app for your customer. So you can group roadmaps by different products and different functions. So if you're communicating internally to different teams, product teams, this is a really good way to do that. Like, this product team is working on this product team is working on that. So it's one way of grouping products. And this is most common way that you see in a company: grouping products and features by product teams. Another way you can do it is you can group product roadmaps by goals and releases, or by themes. So what you can do is you can group it like this, like a heart. This is very good for high-level planning. For example, if you're talking to the board or the CEO or the GMs, you can say, these products that we are building contributes to the goals of the business. So you can group them like this, by including the goals and the products. So you can group them like that. So this is very good for high-level stakeholders. Because why? Because that's their job to align this. And if they aligned the goals, they want to understand, well, what are you building to achieve these goals? So you can group it like that. There's also another way to do it as well. You can group it by current, near term, and future term. This is a very good way for B2B products. So if you have a B2B customer, like Salesforce, for example, they can't tell you exactly when certain things are launched, but they can tell you exactly, they can say, oh, look, in the near term, we have this. So if you've got B2B customers that want to know what you're doing, this is a really good way to do that. Same thing with B2C as well. Sometimes you might have a B2C product, like Zinja, for example. So Zinja, it's an Australian bank, and they have their roadmap on a public, so you can go there and just check it out. You can Google it, Zinja roadmap, and they talk about the stuff they're doing in the future, and then high-level dates. So anything that is like public roadmap, and public roadmap is whole theory behind that. It all depends. So your business wants, it's part of your business strategy. So you've got a strategy to be customer-centric, transparency, then the roadmap should reflect that. So as a result, you create a public roadmap. And you can also group it by releases and initiatives as well. So different releases, different initiatives. This is very good for product teams to know when are we achieving these goals. And this is very good for those quarterly planning sessions. So yeah, look, there's multiple ways to slice up the roadmap. There's no right or wrong. This is my way of doing it as Society One. So I did it by 3 months horizon, 1 or 2 months up next. What are we building now and what's been done? Because our company is quite small and we don't need to do too much detailed planning. So we just kept it high level like that. And again, roadmap is a view of your product strategy, right? So don't skip the product strategies. That's important. This is just one view of doing it. And how you want to govern a roadmap as well. That's the last thing I want to cover in the last minute that we have. So because you have different levels of planning, as a result, you need to set up these different levels of gates so you can plan and govern your roadmap. So you want to have a quarterly planning to review business goals and initiatives. This sometimes can be set up by the leadership team, but if it doesn't exist, you need to know this and you need to set this up. So every quarter, you should review the goals. So set this up early, usually about 2-hour meeting. You need to have a monthly meeting to talk about the product roadmap. And this is usually set by you and other leadership teams and other key stakeholders like tech leads and design leads and so on. It's 1-hour meeting for you to review how you're tracking with your product. So every month you should review your roadmap. And then same thing, there should be a product working group that happens every single week, every single fortnight to talk about the feature roadmap. What are you building? How are you grooming your product? And if you work on like a sprint basis, that's what you do the sprint planning on, which is this. Just now, sprint planning is another name for product working group. And I call this product working group because I want us to be agnostic of agile, which is the topic we're going to talk about next week. So yeah, so these are the 3 levels of planning that you need to have to govern your roadmap. So in summary, mindset, process, and tools. The mindset to come up with a great roadmap is a visual display of your product strategy. Another mindset is you can't create a good roadmap unless your strategy is being set. And also product features or product features, it's just a matter of perspectives and you need to communicate to the right audience using the right terminology. And here are the 3 roadmaps that you've got to create: initiative, product, and feature. And here are other tools that you can use. So Aha, Product Board, and Trello are great for product road mapping. And then you want to assign this into Jira, Pivotal Tracker, and Azure DevOps. So depending on how your developer is managing different delivery of your roadmap, you want to basically link everything up together. And I would suggest to separate the roadmap tool to the delivery tool because they have different mindsets behind them. As a result, the tools should be different. So yeah, that's basically it for today. And I'll send out this link for us to do homework, which is a quiz on Google Form. And let me just send this out. Yeah, so click on that link afterwards in the chat and also in the email that I'll send out and quiz yourself and see whether if you learnt the stuff that we talked about today. So